Welcome back to the show, Stephen. It's been a spell, I would say, but if I was going to ask you what's on your mind, how would you give me an answer?
Food.
Food.
I'm hungry.
Now, is that programming that put that into your head? Did you see a Denny's ad? And Denny's ad said, we have this nice stack of flapjacks. And you're like, that looks appealing. And it's $4.99. What?
No, I can't say it was programming. It's just good old fashioned physical needs. I've not had anything to eat yet today, so I'm getting ready for something to eat. And my daughter's here today, and she's making us Swedish meatballs. So looking forward to that.
Wait, hold on a second. I had a whole entire plan to go into, but what is Swedish meatballs?
Well, just meatballs with a very particular sauce. I'm happy to send you the recipe if you and your listeners would like it.
I was gonna ask, what would you consider control? Like when you talk about the word control, I think that means a lot of things. But I
Yeah.
think when people say that some people would probably do better to have, like if I could give you an example, for instance, of if you
Cool.
could pick anyone that you've ever studied, anybody that you've ever looked at through history, one person that you would feel like would be the best person to be put in a position of power or be given unlimited power, who would you say it would be?
Okay. I'm gonna. I'm not going to answer your question, I'm afraid, because I don't think it's good for anybody to have too much power and control. I think we need, no matter how worthy the individual, no matter how good the person, no matter how much that individual wants to do the right thing, I think we need those checks and balances, as you say, over the pond. We can't have too much power in the hands of any individual. I do believe.
That is the correct answer. You get 400 points on the board for that specific answer. Because mostly when I've asked this question, at least to people that I meet on like when I go outside or go to like someone I know,
Mm.
in a message or something, they give you the answer. I think Gandhi would be like the best person, right? And I'm like, Gandhi, what do you know about him? Well, he was never a
Exactly.
fighter. He was never this type of person that would do this. And I was like, well, did you know Gandhi also said that if it's for something, a cause that is worth your time, that in your mind is worth it, it's worth a fight. He was a passive guy, but he also had a side to him where he was not shy of fighting for what he believed in, and you start to realize that the word power, the word control, that can mean so many different things. And everyone tries to isolate it down into one variable, but I don't look at it as one variable. I think there's so many factors that come into play. I mean, you talking to high control groups, for instance, what do we classify as a high control group? You'll come across Jehovah's Witnesses that'll have a story, but then you'll come across someone that was in like the Hale Bebop comet that are like, that's not a cult. What I was in was a cult. And it's like, you both are technically correct, but everyone is involved in some type of power struggle. It's the biggest fight within inside of us as people. We fight for power. We fight for control. We try and fight for the things that we can control. And then we push that boundary even farther when we get comfortable with the things we can control. For instance, when someone is in a relationship with someone, instead of having a kid, they test it with a dog. Usually it's a dog or like a pet of, if you get an iguana, you're in a freaking weird kink of a relationship, but it happens. I'm not going to discern you from it, but you get a pet to see if you can handle a pet, you can handle a kid. You start to realize that they're two completely different things. And now you have two different things on your hands now, where it seems like your control is a little bit out of grasp. But once you get comfortable to a new standard of living, comfortable to a new situation, comfortable to a new experience, you feel like you can tackle on more. So many people go, well, we manage one kid and he's still, he's functional, so let's have another. And then that becomes out of hand for the first couple of months or maybe the first year. Then that extends to maybe we could have another. And the next, you got these Irish families that have like 20 to 30 kids in a home.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about there is the subject of control, but I would also I would say that there's also different types of control. So, from a psychologist point of view, it's funny because I was just talking about this today because I wanted to talk about this on my podcast. But there's it's getting quite old now, but there's a way of thinking about power by a couple of psychologists called French and Raven. and they identify different sorts of power. So if you think about like the power of the boss, if you like, that person, that's called legitimate power. Somebody has given them power and authority. That could come from being voted into power, or it could be because you're born into power, or because it's the boss and the boss has made you the next supervisor or whatever. That's
He
called
signs your
legitimate power.
paychecks.
Exactly. So that's legitimate power. You've got this hierarchy, and somebody fits into that somewhere. That's a power structure. But then you've got things like reference power, which is the sort of power you might have over somebody who wants to be your friend. That's a different sort of power. Then you've got power that could be the power to give you some reward or to withdraw some reward from you. So that's another type of power. So actually, power is a really interesting question. And what I think might be a difference between a lot of the power relations that we are used to every day and what we might call a cultic or coercive relationship would be that often they hold all the different types of power. So if you're in a cult, there's a hierarchy. You know who your boss is, and that's the same person that has all the knowledge, that has the expert power, if you like. They have all the knowledge about the wisdom that they're telling you is very, very important. Everybody wants to please the leader. They have the control as to whether you get fed or whether you have to work in the yard, or whether you sleep in a bed, or whether you sleep outside. So actually, this is the difference, I think, between the normal sorts of power relations that, yes, everybody gets and has to negotiate, and what you're experiencing in a cult, because there you have a coercive relationship, which means basically one individual or a group of leaders hold all the power. And then, of course, you do have, it's like on a spectrum, it's a dimension as opposed to, this is a cult, this isn't a cult. There's things that are much more culty than others, if you like. So there's a sort of spectrum of cultishness, I would also describe. But I think that's the differences.
I think it's interesting because if we take, for example, I'll give you what I would call fractured power, and I just made that up 2 seconds ago. I'm going to label it right now. Robbie made fractured power. I think power can be dimensionally changed or cracked in a way when you take, for example, what someone is controlling. When you add, like we talk about the dog, for instance, in a relationship, and then you extend that to something else. If you give a person, I consider if you own fish, you want to control something. You want something to be at your whim, knowing that any second you could rip this thing out of its life. They're entertaining to look at for sure. But if you just decide I'm fucking done with fish, and then you throw it down the drain, or you end up you dump out the tank or something, you could do so whenever you please. You're basically a god amongst these fish. But then if we take that person that might love their fish entirely, might love their fish so much that they would never even hurt it. They take care of these things for 30 years. He wakes up every single day, feeds these fish, and really cries and has a burning Viking funeral when one of them dies. But then we give him the option to be in charge of a SeaWorld, where now he has more funds and he has people that are under his belt to be able to control, to be able to do things. And he starts abusing his power because he knows he has the power to be able to do so. So is there a proper way to have power? Or is just power just this thing that, depending on how far the reach of it goes, it can corrupt anyone? I think that's what's really weird about the human mind. My fascination with a lot of the ex-cult stuff, or people that are leaving these cults, is from talking to them, is trying to pick their brain on to figure out, because you realize they're more malleable and more resulting, like we talked about in the first episode, of going back to something or being convinced into something easier because that's what they've kind of grew up on. And then this real come to conflict personality or divide, I would say, like a split in their ego and in their mind of who they are as a person, what is going on, because everything they've known for the past however long they were involved in it has been this way, has been to do this greater thing. And now all of it's kind of shattered in the matter of they don't know what to believe in anymore. It's this weird, like, I love how the brain works in that aspect of things, because if you really truly examine what control and what power is, if we want to go down the Illuminati route, there is things that are going on that you start to realize much control, if you would have asked me when I was 15 years old how much control I have into my own life, I would have told you I can do whatever I want. I can do literally anything. But once I got my car keys, that was proven more towards me that I can literally do what I want. I can go where I want, whenever I want, at the drop of a hat. And then as you get older, you start to see all these things where the government has been exposed in so many ways on social media, and with the fact of the internet and technology being able to do so, you realize you don't really have that much control in your own life. You can go to your job, you can choose to go to work, you can choose what job you want, but eventually it's going to phase you out to a point where it realizes now you're broke, now you don't have a home, now you've lost all these things, and not the job or the pursuit that you want to do is not the one that's valuable anymore. What's now valuable is getting a job to be able to feed yourself. The system is kind of set up to literally phase you out if you're not going to benefit it. So, there's very few people that have been able to escape that rabbit hole or be able to go past that and surpass it to this point of being a Jake Paul or a popular celebrity like a Brad Pitt. And you start to wonder, am I really in control of my own life? Or is this just a factor of everything around me that's been built up for so long, generations upon generations, to make me a cog in a machine? And this is when people start to lose their shit, because now they're like, oh my God, who am I? You're looking in the
I,
mirror and
I,
you're
I think this is a lie that we've all been fed, that you can ever have complete control and power over your life. I mean, think about anybody that you want to think about. There's always a restriction to your freedom and my freedom. We cannot live without those restrictions, and that's partly because we live in social groups. So, if you think about, go back before civilization and before politics as we know it, if we were living in small communities, villages, or whatever, tribes, if you like, straight away you have limitations within yourself. So as a child, you have to some degree, you have to be looked after, you have to be fed. And then as you grow older, you start to want to experience new experiences. But there's other people that also want to experience new experiences. And then some of the things you might want to do might interfere with those other people's freedoms. Plus we have physical limitations. Maybe I want to never sleep because I've got too much to do, but I can't do that. No matter how much I try, I need to sleep for a certain amount of hours every day, because that's part of my limitation. And you fast forward this right through to, the richest person in the world, the person that you think might have the most material possessions, the most freedom to do what they want. I mean, you mentioned Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt can't go outside without getting accosted. I'm sure, there's somebody going to want to take his photograph. So he can't live a life. He can't go down to the shopping mall just when he feels like it. So there'll be a whole bunch of stuff that he can't do, that you can do and I can do that he can't. So I think it's all about trade-offs, isn't it? We all have to make these trade-offs, So yeah, I have a certain amount of freedoms that I enjoy, but I don't have total freedom, and I never could, because there are physical limitations and limitations whenever you live in any sort of group with other people, because they have wants and needs as well.
You
So
understand
that's
what I'm talking about, though, with like the whole fact of people coming to grips with this kind of realization of like, it's kind of like a self-identity crisis in a way. People don't know who they are because they feel like all these things that they see as these powerful, these controlling things. And it gets a little strange when you think of this, for instance, when you choose and you see this and you get to the worst possible case, the end of your rope, that you want to decide to take your own life. The system doesn't like that. So what they do is they say, okay, well, someone's got to pay for you to have your out. So we're going to charge your family. It's called a death tax when someone dies. There's certain things that, oh, they have to pay off this, they have to pay off that. They took the easy way out, and we're not just going to let it go. Somebody's going to give us the money. It's kind of like with the church. Okay, if you want your out, you have to do all these types of lists of things to be able to get out freely. And even then, you're not truly out of it 100%. You're still involved with it. I mean, I don't know if you saw recently trending was Danny Masterson and the Scientology thing, where that was under this huge scrutiny. And people were, if you look at the Scientology building, And I've had Scientologists on here, so I'm not dismissing it. I can't get with that one. But it looks like a fucking Disney amusement ride. Like it's this like purple building from what I've seen, and it's got Scientology written on the front. Where I'm like, this is like if I'm going to Hershey Park. I don't get it. Is it that's the point of it? I don't understand of where it goes. But then you start to realize like these things that are set into place to keep you running in a functional system. That's what I would consider a power control thing. But there's not a whole lot of limitations on what they can do. The best example of that is the CCP in China. They do some outrageous shit where it looks horrible to us. And then we just point the blame onto that. But you are correct about checks and balances. The president or the queen, whichever you want to say, cannot be like, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want, because people will look at them and say, why are you doing that? Why are you doing this? They're going to get some blowback with media, which is kind of the importance of media, as much as we can talk about how it's very manipulative. It does expose a lot of this corruption type stuff, but somehow they still get it done. And there is a fall guy. There is a person that pays a price to it. There is something, even though they want it done, they're not going to do it, but they're going to pay someone else to do it. And that's when it looks at the power of control and the idea of power. There's a price to it. But now it's to the point where that person that does the act or gets the power or gets the benefit doesn't always have to pay the price. Now it's going to be someone else.
Yeah, I think that's right. And a couple of things I wanted to pick up on. I want to pick up what you just said there, but just going back to something you said before, Rob, about people leaving high control groups. I would say there's a period where they are working through that difficulty of trying to find who they are and, create this kind of new way of thinking about themselves. But I think that you can work through that. So I don't think that's forever. Coming back to your point that you're just making there, I would say that you've always got networks of power. So I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't really sign up to these grand conspiracies, but I think it's completely right that we have networks of power in the world. So in my country, in the UK, for instance, if you happen to have money to start with, you get to go to one of the posh private schools. And then from there, you get to go to Eton. And then from there, you get to go to Oxford or Cambridge. And then from there, you've got a good chance of getting into the government. So if you look at the government who are currently in power in the UK, a good percentage of them, much bigger than you would expect, come from Eton or from Oxford or Cambridge, one of these big unis. And that's not because they're brighter than everybody else. That's just because their daddy and mummy had the money and they've inherited that. But it's more than just money. It's those connections. You meet this person while you're at school, and then you know this person, and you know that person. So it's these networks, I think, that help create that imbalance of power that we've got. And as society progresses, those imbalances get worse until at some point, it just breaks. And I think that's my concern at the moment, is that people feel, in the West particularly, we feel like there's such a massive gap between the ordinary people and people with too much power. And along with that comes money and influence and so on. So I'd agree that we do have that. Part of it is you're always going to have restrictions because, as I say, life's like that. But also because the system is skewed to those already having the power. And so long as they have it, they're going to try and create and manage the system to avoid losing it, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what's happening at the moment within developed countries anyway.
With for instance, when I was talking about someone's the fall guy. Now I'm pretty sure you've probably seen the world's kind of turned on a certain person that's been a kind of in charge of the COVID studies or the COVID research, Mr. Fauci. I'm not a fan of his at all. But also I look at it how the world is now turning on him because he's being exposed as a liar. And I'm not seeing the people that also should be paying the price for this as well, too. The government, for instance, they're kind of like, he's going to be our fall guy now. And I'm like, hang on a second. You're just as the best example I could give you besides that would be the CDC, for instance. They opposed all these guidelines of social distancing, mask, and wiping down surfaces and not coming in contact and all these things, and even wearing a mask outside. And they made mayors and governors down here be able to follow those regulations. Then when it started to turn and people started saying, well, now you're exposing this as all being bullshit. We're mad at you now, CDC. And they said, no, it wasn't us. It was your mayors and governors. They had the right to do whatever they want. But the governors were just following the CDC guidelines that they were told to do. But they pushed it off because they didn't want the blame. So it's like all the time you come across a major news or a major movement that goes on, it seems like you get right to the doorstep before exposing something big. Something gets dangled in front of us where we think that's the main objective, and it's not. It's like a ploy. It's a different thing rather than the thing we should be tackling. The real people that should be paying for this always seem to get off scot-free because they can turn it and they can make someone else by giving them a lot of power and then making them fall on their own power, making them fall to their own demise on these types of things, with Fauci, with the CDC, pointing the mayors or the governors, making them responsible, making them. It's always like that. It seems like right when we get to the door of what would be an Illuminati, they fucking do something like this hand's doing something, this hand's doing something else. I'm like, hang on a second. Why does everyone hate this one person when he was doing what they were doing? Well, he was the one that was the face of it all. It's like, okay, well, if I had power, I don't want to be the face of the power. I want to be the one that has actual power. It's kind of like the queen in a way. She resembles like this old hierarchy type thing, like the president does. I don't think Biden's running shit. I think there's a bunch of people like moving him around and putting him into place. I'm like, those motherfuckers, they have it figured out. They get all the power and all the perks, but then someone is the face of it all.
So what I would say, Rob, is that I think we need to understand each of these institutions, because this is the thing I think we don't understand enough about in the general population is institutions, because institutions are the things that either protect us or can actually be responsible for some of these terrible things happening. And actually, we don't pay much attention to the institutions. People always focus on the individuals, but it's the institutions that really matter, because it's within those things that, yes, people operate, but they operate within certain frameworks and processes and systems that actually have encapsulate all the control. So I'll give you, you've mentioned the Queen. The Queen has zero power in the UK. She's basically, well, that's the way it works. She has no power. She's purely a figurehead. So the Queen doesn't make any decisions.
Who's working the real shit is what I want to know.
Well, it's Boris Johnson. It's the Prime Minister in the UK. This is the way the Constitution works, is that we have what's called a constitutional monarchy, but she or he has no power. We got rid of the power of the monarchy centuries ago.
So you get the love and the hate, but you don't really have any say in what actually gets going on.
Exactly. I mean, it's the Prime Minister that appoints the cabinet, and the people. When we vote for a government. We don't vote for the Queen or whoever's going to. So we vote for the government, and it's the government that make the decisions. As soon as the monarch starts making the decisions, then you've got a different system. You've got a monarchy. We don't really have that sort of monarchy. So the Queen has no power. All she is a figurehead, and she turns up at state events and so on. But she has no power.
The Queen on this podcast.
Absolutely. See how you get on.
Think she wants to talk about poop?
Tune in for that. Maybe.
Royal flush is what we call it.
So my point is that unless you understand what the institution is like, it's easy to run away with the wrong idea. Again, think about, obviously I'm not American, but I observe from afar what happens. And from what I understand it, Fauci he's a public health official. We have them in the UK. Public health officials have kind of a very simple job in many respects. Their primary purpose is to worry about public health, whereas a politician has to worry about public health, but also the economy, also, public unrest and so on. So they have a bigger portfolio of things that they have to worry about. So what they should be doing is listening to multiple sources, and it's them that make the decision, not people like Fauci, or in the UK it's Chris Whitty, or the other medical experts. We should be listening to those. And it could be, I think personally, that we need to listen to those more than other people at the moment, because they're the experts in their field. But we can't blame them for the decisions, because it's not them that are making it. It's the government that makes those decisions. In the US, that's split into states and counties and so
Look,
on.
it's the
In
snake
UK
biting
too.
his snake biting his own tail. You know, it's crazy because you look at like and if you asked anybody who was the figure face or who was the face of COVID, you're going to say it's going to be one of two people. It's going to be Anthony Fauci, or it's going to be that GIF or that meme that you would open up and it's a giant guy sitting on the edge of the bed naked. You know who I'm talking about? That one horrible picture I think we all opened because at the start of COVID, I thought he released it. And actually, he's a really cool guy. He's a French guy. He actually did those photos. You
Okay.
know what I'm talking about, right?
No, I've not seen that.
I'm
I'll
not
miss that
showing it on this
meme.
podcast.
No, don't show it me.
You
I'll
get
look
me
it. I'll look it
banned
up.
real quick. It's this giant like black guy,
Okay.
and he's sitting on
Okay.
the edge of a bed, and he's naked. And people were sending it around as a joke because at the start of COVID, you would get this link and it would tell you that there's been COVID cases in your area. Check here to make sure your school is safe or something. You know, a lot of parents would click it thinking their kid was going to be exposed to something. And it would be this horrible picture of this beautiful man just sitting there on the edge of the bed. Turns out, backstory behind him is he's a French guy. He actually did those photos because he knew he was dying of a terminal illness and he wanted to leave his family some money. I found that out through a podcast. They actually tracked the family down and was able to make sure they raised money for his family too, as well. And actually gave him a proper burial and everything too, because they didn't have money for it. So besides that quick little joke that went off on a tangent, Fauci is kind of the figurehead or the face when you say of COVID. He loved it at the start because everyone was looking at him like a god. They were like, you have all the answers. What are we going to do? How are we going to come out of this? What should we do next? What should we be doing? Everything was that. Now it's kind of flipped. And now he's kind of regretting it a little bit, where now he's kind of hitting on some points. For instance, there was an article about where actually the guy follows me on Twitter. His name's Josh Rogan. He was on a Joe Rogan podcast talking about the CCP. It's kind of where I went off a little bit about China. I want to get him on here to talk about this type of stuff, but he was talking about how it came from the lab. Now, the way that Trump described it and all these types of things made it seem like you're being racist because he called it China virus, which is dumb as shit to even say. But he called it that, saying that it was originated from there and it was all their fault, which became this anti-movement, which is horrible. But if you think they're testing back coronaviruses, they're doing all this stuff, should we at least check it out? But even saying that, you come off, people would call you a racist. And now Fauci has even said, yeah, we probably should check the lab, because he's watching the tables get turned. The face of this whole entire thing, doing what, hey, government comes up to you and says, hey, man, we don't want to get into conflicts with the Chinese government. So can you make sure that people stay away from the lab thing? And then they had this beautiful plan set up. And then now the public is starting to fight back with the amount of exposures the internet has. And fucking now Fauci's like, yeah, there's a possibility it came from the lab. It's like, wait a minute, you said that it didn't, and now you're backtracking. What else have you fucking lied about? Or what else have you said that you're hiding something? Because he's realizing he's getting thrown under the bus. And it's kind of like his grab of like, I'm going to take you at least down with me, or at least let people see that you fucking threw me under the bus. It makes sense if you really examine it to a point. Like, I'm not fucking crazy here. Like, that does make a little bit of logical sense, because if you look at anything, that sounds like a movie plot scenario. But if you look at anything in the fucking government, it's like a movie scenario. In North Korea, they introduced the sister, and I'm like, this is the best fucking TV show I've ever seen. They introduced the evil sister no one knows about. I'm like, what the fuck is this? You know what I'm talking about? I'm not crazy. I feel like I'm smoking crack, but I'm not. I'm telling you, it's nuts.
I mean, you couldn't make it up, could you? I've been saying that given what's happened over the last couple of years, it's aliens next, isn't it? Because it's just been so crazy. Yeah, I mean, my approach, Rob, I take a slightly different approach to you, obviously. My approach is that there's a heck of a lot of stuff I don't know.
Yes.
So I don't know
That's what I'm
whether
saying. I don't
Fauci,
know anything.
no, I don't know whether Fauci loved the limelight or not. I mean, he may have done. I have no idea, and I've probably got no way of knowing whether he did or not.
He
So
accepted every interview that came his way. I don't know a lot of
so
politicians that would do that.
maybe that means he did, or maybe it means that he wanted to get important health messages across as he is a public health official. I don't
Double
know.
mask, wear condoms, do whatever the hell you want. I'm like, yes.
Maybe he did. I don't know. Oh, that's all I'm saying. I don't know. Did the virus come from a lab, or did it arise from a bat, or did it come from a pangolin? My understanding at the moment is, honestly, we don't have enough information to know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
What feels like, and where I would kind of agree with you, is that it feels like, because we have this tribal situation at the moment more than ever, just by asking a question that you are genuinely asking, not actually just trying to agitate, you genuinely want to know the answer to it, that can itself be seen as taking a position and being in a certain camp. And I try to avoid that. So I'm very careful with the things I say, because it can be misunderstood.
I get
But,
it. I mean, I've
we don't
said
know, do we? We don't know the answer to that question.
that's what I'm saying. I don't know, but that was just, I mean, I started saying it and then it came out in this way where I was like, that could be a possibility. You say that it's not, don't say that it's not, because once you eliminate this and you cut off that bridge to never go there, what happens if it is right? And then it seems like now what we're doing is everything that we're kind of re-upping or turning around. They're trying to figure out how to do a complete 180 of everything that they've passed to be able to go back to, because they realize the truth is in the back. They fucking passed it. So I look at it like this. Instead of me, the way I'm reacting to this is because I'm not a conspiracy guy. I'm not thinking the government is this giant. Maybe there's an Illuminati. I don't fucking know, man. But I'm upset. And the reason I get so ranting about this is because you start to see a powerful force that is not getting the repercussions of their actions. They're slipping through a little bit. And that's what I don't like, because right now the world is pretty divided. The world is finding ways to keep fighting each other. And it's not from our own actions. It's from something getting thrown into the mix. Something's tossing a monkey wrench in there that's spiking up all these people, that's twisting things around to make it turn into this thing. They talked about the popsicle theory, which is like that they think the coronavirus came off of a frozen food truck and they should search every frozen food truck from here to Norwegia or Sweden, whatever the hell it is. And it's just busy work. It's 100 years of busy work for you to check all these things out, because that is basically a very long time to try and search every single frozen food truck, every single frozen food package in countries just to be able to find the source, when it's like, should we check the liable source here thing? But my point is, when you start looking at ways that things get tossed into your face to distract you from the true answer of things, that has been recorded in our history as ways and methods. There's literally people that will spark up insurrections, spark up riots. It happened during the Black Lives Matter protest. The government had paid people to go into this and start riots and start fighting so the cops could take it over and eliminate the whole entire movement, on an aspect of that they just wanted it shut down. They didn't want it happening. They didn't want to see this in the streets. They didn't want to see this on television. That was real shit that came out. And people didn't even really question it, because not even a couple months later, they started talking about UFOs and shit. And I'm like, fucking, they're tossing the UFO thing at you now. And people like me that want to believe in aliens are fucking losing their shit. They're like, aliens are here. Aliens are here. I'm like, hang on a second. Let's focus on the government doing this crazy shit. But it's dingling shiny keys in front of a child.
I mean, I'm sure that sort of thing happens because people want to manipulate the media message, don't they? And they want the agenda to be whatever's in their interest at any given time. Well, one of the things that I think is really important, and it's one of the areas that I'm most worried about, is that again, coming back to institutions, some of the media, like the newspapers, in the UK, we've got the Times. I know you've got different Times in different states in America, but the Times is a good example of a newspaper that has a unit in it called the Insight Team, and you've got these teams in lots of American newspapers as well. the group that did that revealed all the abuse that was happening in the Catholic Church. Can't remember what it was called now. But these are like units that do investigative reporting to find out what's going on. And these are really skilled reporters. They're able to find out what's going on. They talk to people. They dig in. They do proper
Actual journalism.
actual journalism, exactly. And they are often the ones that reveal some of these stories. So that's how we get to know about, as I say, the abuse in the Catholic Church, or abuses in different governments and so on. And that's one thing, but it's another thing to have just people like you and me, in all honesty, just spitballing about what could happen. And unfortunately, I think it's fine for us to do that, but unfortunately, because of the new media landscape, people just listen to people like you and me with as much credibility as they do proper journalism. And newspapers are struggling, the news media is struggling to actually make a living out of doing journalism. So what we're left with is just people spitballing on YouTube or having podcasts. I mean, I do all of these things personally too, but I think it's important for us to recognize that this is not journalism. These are opinions.
These are conversations that we're
these
having.
are conversations.
I'm not a
Exactly.
journalist. I wanted to be at one
Exactly.
point, but I've talked to so many where any person with a phone or a blog is technically a journalist.
Mm.
Journalism is actually truly dead. The person that
And
I,
that's worrying.
yeah, well,
Yeah,
here's the
that's
funny
worrying.
thing is that the new, with Fauci getting thrown under the bus, there's now a new face of COVID. There's now a new face of the vaccine. There's a new face of the mask movement. And then that is that fucking guy from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Matthew McConaughey had a message on the TV this morning for every single anti-masker, anybody that's not getting the vaccine. And he's just losing his shit for 30 minutes. But if you read the headline, it's kind of like if you look at any government project, whether it's from my country or your country, they do something bad and then they do something great before they leave or before they go away. So then you only remember that good thing that they did. You lose track of the bad. You leave on a good note rather than leave on a bad one that's going to fester over time. For instance, I examine right now, whatever in the UK, examine whatever the hell your government's doing, because they just put up that thing about all those bodies that they found at that one school. And I'm like, that they're doing something that just didn't just pop out of fucking nowhere. That's something that they had been sitting on for a while. Not they're trying to rile you up over something and get your attention distracted. That's my thoughts, because I've seen everything. I've talked to so many people that study history, study the shit the government does. All right, here's a good one. Ready? Oh God, I'm gonna rant. Here we go. I'm cracking back. I'm gonna grab my list of questions here, my scripted questions I always have when a guest comes on the show. Ready? No, just kidding. If I read you the first one and I say, how important to you is mental health on a scale of 1 to 10?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's right up there, isn't it? Number 10.
Okay. Now, if I asked you, how much does the world care about mental health? 1 out of 10.
Yeah, very low. Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't like to put a number on it, but low, yes.
If I asked you, how many things do you see on the TV that say we're pro mental health or ways that you can cope with mental health, and there's options and avenues to be able to go down? Would you say there's a lot?
Of course.
Okay, well, so that's a disguise then, right? Because it seems like there's all this pro going after something and being able to help you, but nobody's stopping it. We're just implementing new things and new options and avenues to be able to cope with it and deal with it and find ways to hopefully get over it.
This is, I mean, every time you wait on the phone on a phone queue, your custom is important to us. There's another one. So yeah, we're lied to. Absolutely, people lie to us all the time. So I would totally agree with that. I think an observation more than anything would be that we have governments that are generally pretty incompetent who also lie to us. That's my view. So this is one of the reasons why I don't subscribe to these vast conspiracy theories, because I think that requires a level of competence that I just simply don't see in structures of power.
So if you
You know,
know that they have a little bit of lying to them or they have this power thing to them, why would you not raise a question to them? Why would you do that's my whole point here to circle it back around. Is this fact of like we trust in something because it says the government, they know they're going to know best. But then when you really truly examine it like piece by piece, you start to realize that they really don't know what the fuck they're doing. They're kind of it's easier to make you prey on this fear narrative that everyone kind of adapted with the pandemic. It's easier to live in a world or the government to be able to run, whether it's my country or yours, instead of your love and admiration. Yeah, okay. If me and you are best friends, for instance, me and you are, we're hanging out every single day and I ask you to do something, you're going to do it. But then if it's something you really don't want to do, like if I ask you, can you mow the lawn for me? You're going to think, Rob, I do not feel like doing that. But if I'm your dad and you're a small little kid and I have more power than you and I could pick you up and throw you through a wall if I felt like it, and I told you, do it, you're going to go out and do it. You're going to bitch about it, but you're going to do it. It's living in fear. It's that fear aspect in the narrative that cults, that all these things prey off of to be able to have their power. Love is really, really strong. It is. But making people afraid and making people feel like they don't know where to go in life is the easiest way to be able to get what you want done, what you feel like you should be doing. And that's the problem we see with all these people that come out of these cults, is that they're afraid. They don't know. I think a passion of mine that I could probably get interested in is being able to help some of these people assimilate back into society. That's the biggest thing on my mind, is the conflict that you're coming to grips with, realizing that you've been controlled and you have no adaptive skills to be able to survive outside of this thing. Everything you've learned has been to benefit this thing. When we talk about society and the workforce and jobs, everything we know how we live is not really necessarily what we want to be doing. Maybe it's the fact that we need to pay bills. We need to be a functioning cog in the machine. And if you're not benefiting towards it, you're now an issue. You're now a problem, and you need to try and find a way to go back into the system. Everything reverts you back into a functioning member of society. What's a functioning member of society? This is why they have problems with artists. You put a fucking banana and duct tape on a wall and you get paid $1 billion for that. The government goes, I don't know. Can we tax it? Can we tax it? I don't know. I don't know how to deal with this kid, but he's not doing anything that we want him to do. He's not getting a job. He's not working 9 to 5. He's not doing these hours and he's not doing it. What do we do? Well, he's a creative, so we have to give him more attention than ever. So people look at him as an exception to the rules. Oh God, I just fucking created my own little conspiracy thing. Suck me out of that. Get me out of that.
so it's
Because you're looking at me like he's not
throwing all
wrong.
these things at me. Chung, 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 chung. Yeah, I mean, you're right to say that we live in a confusing world. And I guess we're probably not disagreeing, actually. We're probably saying
We're talking.
pretty much the same thing, really. I think all I'm saying is that we have generally complex problems with governmental systems that don't necessarily work all that well, that themselves have limited amounts of power and influence because of the complexity of what they're trying to do. I would also add that the way that we vote our leaders in is also flawed, because we don't really get to grips with the detail of what these governments are going to do, or we don't really understand that we're not getting into the weeds of this policy or that policy. We end up with lots of buzzwords thrown at us, so people think they know what this word means or that word means, and there's lots of tribalism around it. So in the end, I mean, the United States is just, but the UK is just the same. It ends up becoming about a few votes in a few regions of the country that determine who gets voted in. And I mean, we've not had a decent candidate for prime minister for years. The people that we have to choose from are just not particularly high caliber. They're not people that have got lots of experience in making decisions. I mean, Boris Johnson is a is a guy from um, I think he did Latin in university. How's that going to help? We need people that are experts, that are well educated, good at making decisions, and have a track record of doing that. And unfortunately, we don't get those choices. And that's part of the way that politics works. It's also the way that the media reduces everything down to like a few little phrases, and we don't really dig into what these differences are and what these governments are going to do. So I would say it's partly our own fault, and that's perhaps an unpopular thing to say.
I,
But when it comes to voting, how many people actually read the manifesto of each party and what that party is going to do and how they're going to do it?
the best
Very few.
example that goes with that is when I started to question a lot of the stuff that's going on in our political system, is when people started going, are you going to vote for that guy? Or are you going to vote for this guy?
Yeah.
It's the least bad option. I'm like, then I don't want to vote. What the fuck are you?
Yeah.
What did you just say to me? The least bad option? What? We should be trying to find the best that's going to get this country on track. Well, we need to get him out. And he's not necessarily good, but I don't want him in there as well, too. So you hate somebody so much that you're willing to put another pawn that's going to end up being hated just as much. Like so many people that voted for Biden flipped around as soon as he started doing shit they didn't like. Oh, screw Biden. I hate this, but he's better than Trump. What are you saying? I get it. Nobody that we elect is going to be favored until they die in office. And then everyone's like, they were the best president. Reagan was the best president. JFK was the best president. No, because he didn't live throughout his whole entire thing. He died early, and then you look at him like he's the best fucking thing in the world. It's like the Batman quote: either live long enough to see yourself become the villain, or you die soon like a hero, or something like that. You start to look at like, what are people saying when you say the least bad option? We need to try to find the best way to be able to be this type of thing, be this thing that we want to see, this vision that we all want, but we tend to fight over the dumbest things and then leave it by the wayside. It's like when you're a kid, you have dreams of becoming an astronaut. You have dreams of becoming a gardener or an IKEA furniture builder. I hope that's not your childhood dream, but if it is, then I commend you for it, because that's a task and a half. I'm always
It's an
missing
important job.
and missing. This desk is missing 4 screws, and they all are in the desk. So I'm like, why do I have 4 leftover screws? So one day it's going to fall in a Zoom call. I know it. With the amount I move my hands and shit, it's going to happen. But I look at what happened in life that deters you from that thing that you wanted to be so much. Well, I became an adult. Okay. So something was taken from you, your innocence, your imagination, your creativity. I just became real. I understand how the world works. Are you comfortable with that answer? But people say that's just how it is. And that's how everything gets said to me. That's when I started talking about, we talked about in the first episode, when I questioned the church, is when I asked questions and like, you can't come around here anymore. That's real shit. You start to realize that you need to adapt into what they want you to adapt to, rather than be who you truly are. Where I start to ask the question on the show now is, how much of your thoughts are really your own compared to how much are just been told to you or fed into your brain to make you think this type of way? I could sit here and spout off brainwashing, which is like, it could be hypnosis. It could be just certain or linguistical programming, certain words that I say or certain things that I pronounce in a certain way to make you think a certain way. And you start to look at like, am I really the person I'm supposed to be? Or am I just a person?
But we're all influenced, Rob, because if you lived on a desert island somewhere and you never met anybody, you were born on there and somehow you survived, and then I guess you would be the pure being that was Rob. But we're all influenced by our environment and by our parents and by our friends and by our schools and by politicians and by the media. This is and that actually literally reshapes our brain. So we know that our brain remains elastic even as we get older. We learn new things, and by learning those new things, we are literally reshaping the connections in our brain. So yeah, we nobody has a pure thought, if you like, that comes from this pure being that is you. It's all about constructions that we make based around the way that we make sense of the world. So this is all a bit psycho-babblish now, but that's what you do. We make sense of the world, and we do that by relating it to something else. So we kind of frame it in a certain way. So when you see something, you say to yourself, what's that an example of? What am I looking at here? You don't see it just as a pure thing in the world, it's related to the rest of the world. And so when you see something, you think, oh, well, I think that's an example of this. That's an example of lying to me. That's an example of power. That's an example of corruption. Somebody else might look at it and think, well, that's an example of somebody looking after me, or that's an example of somebody caring about what's my opinion is. It could be exactly the same situation, but we all make sense of it in different ways. So nobody has a pure thought. It's all, we're all influenced
Yeah.
by the society in which we live. That's why, you know, if you go and talk to people in a state like North Korea, let's say, um, despite the fact that I guess some of it might be because they're scared about, you know, being observed, but even if they're not, many of them would think that they live in the best country in the world. You know, it's the most wonderful place to live.
They just think
Um,
about it differently because they actually live
exactly.
there. And I
That's what they're used to. So, yeah, you know, you get into, you should do a degree in philosophy. That's what you should do.
I'm okay. I don't understand even what philosophy is. I could ask. I can.
Well,
Somebody
you've
could
just
say
been doing it for the last half an hour.
that's like one of those tweets where if you check someone's Twitter, it says like a philosopher in their bio. I'm like, are you really, or did you just repeat some shit that you heard? I thought I
Yeah,
created a quote when I said to truly understand everything is when you truly admit that you know nothing. I thought that was my own, and someone's like Socrates. I'm like,
Socrates.
son of a bitch. Everyone that you've ever thought any idea has already been
Somebody's got
created.
there first. Yeah,
But
yeah.
I want to talk about this one thing
Go on.
from personal experience. If I ask you about the education system, a lot of people would say it has a lot of issues in it. And I agree. I've
Mhm.
been one of those people that have experienced the issues in it. But then if you talk about all these millennials and you say that they're like crazy woke, they're like this crazy thing that's destroying a lot of shit. In some parts, that's true, but it's not their own fault. It's an aspect of when I was talking to a bunch of academics, people with PhDs, people that are experiencing their funding being pulled out from under them because they were researching, and their school was like, you're not going to be in good standing. Eric Weinstein talked about this on a Joe Rogan podcast about how Harvard made his career and everything look horrible, pulled his funding out from under him, told him that he needed to move because they was researching something that the school didn't deem necessary. Now, I had talked to people who had personally been told that they need to stop researching something, certain studies, because it was affecting the way the school would look because society didn't like those types of things. A fake study was also put up. I forgot what podcast it was I heard it on, but a guy had published a fake study to prove that these systems in education are actually not reading the studies anymore. They look for certain keywords and they decide if this is going to be refused by the public or accepted by the public. So the dude littered in this paper a bunch of words like gay, a bunch of words that would be offensive in society standards if you used it in a study. And the study's overall moral to it was that a woman sat in a dog park for a full year, spending 8 hours in the dog park a day, and she watched the correlation between male dogs humping female dogs and male dogs humping male dogs. And she concluded by the end of her study that all dogs are inherently gay. And that's the study that was published. It's fake. It's bullshit. The numbers do not add up. But the school just saw the keywords and they passed it and said, great study, because it was exposing something that they thought it would be okay with the public. And the guy goes, did you even read it? If you tally up the numbers, a woman sitting in a dog park for 8 hours watching dogs have sex. What are you talking about? Like, that doesn't make any sense. You didn't factor in rain. What happens if it's a rainy day? The number of dogs going to that dog park? All these questions that should be raised when you're doing a thorough study. The school didn't have an answer. And you start to realize, is it the school's issue? But then it gets examined even further. When I listened to that one Josh Rogan podcast, and he starts talking about how in the United Kingdom, mostly in the States, that the Chinese government, the CCP, is now tossing money at these schools and funding these schools and technically slowly controlling over these education establishments. And you wonder why these millennials are so upset with America or upset with their own country is because another country their government that is seen as our competitor is now telling them that their government does all these horrendous acts. And now you feel like you've been lied to for so long. Like George Washington, for instance, people hear the story of the cherry wood tree and his teeth were made of wood. His teeth were made of slave teeth. But that doesn't really fit well in a fucking textbook that you tell the people that live in your country. So people lost their minds when they found out the truth. That's kind of what in this podcast, it's 1640 of Joe Rogan. If anybody wants to listen to it, I've said it multiple times on this show, but you start to realize that it's not even the school's fault anymore. The school's not going to have the kids research things that would be offensive to the Chinese government that's giving them billions of dollars, because what the government will say is, then we'll just cut your funding. You think if you offer someone $8 billion or $8 million for their school to be able to buy new laptops and fucking textbooks and expand to get a beautiful fucking pool with a golf course in the back? No, they're not going to do anything that's going to lose that money because they want those items. That's what I'm saying is there's another perspective. Am I saying that's 100% true in every single school?
I'm going to say, I don't know if that's true. I think there's, again, there's a few different subjects that you're bringing together there, which I would, if I was trying to analyze that, I'd want to separate those out.
Which ones?
So the first one would be, is there undue or are the Chinese,
CCP.
again, whatever that entity is, are they trying to get undue influence over universities? So that would be the first question.
It's a slow war.
So they could, I could imagine that could be possible. That doesn't mean they're doing it, but it could be possible if they were. No doubt, certainly I can speak for, inexperienced UK universities have lots of foreign students who pay a lot of money to come to the UK.
And there's a certain class that teaches them about the CCP. There's a certain thing I forgot the name of, though.
Well, my point is that there could be undue influence. As soon as you get a group saying, well, I'm going to fund you, then there's the risk, isn't there, that there's undue influence there, that somebody's saying, well, the reason I'm giving you all this money is to make sure that you're saying the things that I want you to say. I don't know if that's true. I haven't done that research, and I absolutely couldn't say, well, that's true. But yes, I guess there's a risk that could happen. The whole question, though, around wokeness and I suppose lessons around things like critical race theory and stuff like that.
It started with initially good intent.
So I think, again, what we'd have to do there is look at it case by case and say, right, what are these things that we're actually talking about? So I'm in my 50s now. So I remember when I went to school, some of the things that happened in school, you probably wouldn't believe, in terms of the way that certain people were treated, and we just wouldn't put up with that now. The way that the names people were called, and the jokes that people made of people from Pakistan or from the West Indies and so on. And I think that's a good thing, that we don't have to put up with that anymore.
I agree. The issue that I have with it is that that's what it started off to be. And now it's labeling people as racist. Like, the word has lost a lot of the impact it had.
That's the danger.
That's what I'm trying to raise awareness to, is that this woke culture, the reason why people have issues with woke people, it's not that they're racist people. It's that people are labeling them as something that they're not. I could talk to so many people that I had a person tell me that that's not true. Nobody would say anything without evidence of it. And I said, I could pull up 1,000 fucking tweets on my phone right now by just Googling Pepsi is racist. I did, and I was right. A bunch of Pepsi is racist. If you drink Coke, you support Trump. All this shit was on there. People say whatever the fuck they want, especially when it's on social media. The issue that I have with wokeness is when the NBA was banned in China because of a tweet that a guy put up, and people go, because he put up a racist tweet. Did you actually read the story? Because it's not a racist tweet. He was supporting the Hong Kong protesters, but the government, their issue with a boycott in the Chinese government compared to ours is that when we boycott, it's because the public. over there, it's no, China's government says no. That's the issue. And that can be exposed with, they
Yeah.
said that 1.5 billion people, Chinese citizens, hated that tweet and were protesting that tweet that that guy put up, given alone that Twitter is banned in China. So I just want to ask and raise that question. Shit doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't know all the details about that case either, but from what I understand it, the big problem there is that it's the same in the UK with football. These the Chinese market is huge, so a lot of these big sports businesses, which is what they are, really want to get into the Chinese market. And so as soon as the Chinese government say you need to make an apology, they will make an apology because they don't want to lose that market. So as far as I understand it, that's got nothing to do with wokeness.
Okay,
But
well,
it's got everything to do with money.
Yeah.
Because the teams don't want to lose out on this massive sponsorship and this massive audience that they can get.
Here's the example to the wokeness issue that I'm talking about here to make it in better terms is that
I'm not saying I don't identify as being woke, by the way. I don't use that term, but I'm just sort of,
you're
carry on.
a good human being. So that's it should be what the thing is. But no, the woke thing is, the issue is now we had a shipment of 13 tons of human hair be sent to San Francisco. I've talked about it on the show. Someone has fact checked me on the show and be like, holy shit, you're right. It was for wigs, obviously, but we just raised the question that we know you have concentration camps. The CCP does that, where they have Uyghur. I think they call them something Muslim people. It's
the Uyghurs are like an ethnic grouping, aren't they, within China?
And they have cameras that can identify them and be able to sort out and be able to find them too. That's a whole, I'll send you this podcast you got to listen to. It's 3 hours. I tell people skip 30 minutes in because they talk about comedy for the first 30 minutes. And then 3 hours in, it's just all China government stuff. Like I said, we're not hating on China. It's the CCP, this totalitarian government type system that you can find anywhere. I know people have a problem with Canada right now with being totalitarian. I have friends over there. They're like, this sucks. I'm like, it's fucking government, man. It's money. That's all it is. But when I say the idea with wokeness is when we stopped that boat and we found the shipment of hair, we sent it back. The CCP and the Chinese government called us racist because all we did was raise the question, did that come from the concentration camp where you got the human hair? And I don't think those people were paid for that, to get their head shaven if they're in a concentration camp. And they called us racist, and it became this big exploit thing where now people are saying the government's racist. And that's where woke becomes an issue, is because now even Nike said something. The cotton that's being made for our clothes, does that come from, like, can I ask that? That's the question now. Can I ask that? Can I ask if are these people being paid for the services, or are you forcing them to do these labor acts? Well, we're not forcing them, but they can't leave. It's like, what are you saying? And the reason I freak out about this is because there's apps like TikTok and Clubhouse that are banned in certain things because they send your data over to these things. Clubhouse isn't available in China because 6 weeks into it, they canceled that shit out because they realized people were talking to other people outside of the region. I just look at the reason why I get so frustrated by it is because I don't like something having more power than someone else, treating them like they're a fucking ant or a fish in a fish tank. Like, we can go back to the beginning. It all roots right back around to the beginning. You start to realize that this corruption, this mindset, your distorted perception, this woke thing, people are now labeling other people as racist, even though it's supposed to be for good intent. You're supposed to find these horrible acts because we think differently as people, but it's not like that anymore. So then when I sit here and spout it off and you're like, this sounds insane, it's all real shit. It's like the same thing with the conspiracy things. I've said Bohemian Grove multiple times on the show, and I've had people go, what is that? And I'm like, oh my God, what? And you realize how big that is. I don't know if you know what Bohemian Grove is, but
I've heard of it. Yeah.
It turns into this big thing where it's like, this information, someone doesn't know it, so you want to shout it from the rooftops. And that's where I start freaking out and seeming like I'm a nut job, when really it's just so much information to try and expose to people or let people know what's going on. To sit there and say it's not happening is bad of you as a person if you choose to do that. I'm not saying you, I'm just saying as people.
Sure. But again, it's how you interpret it, isn't it? So the Bohemian Grove thing, I'm really a bit of a fan of John Ronson, who is a
Wait, the guy from
journalist.
Parks and Rec?
Probably not the same one. I don't think. No, he's a journalist, and him and Alex Jones actually went to this thing. This
Got
is going
video.
back many years, yeah. And so I'm pretty sure I'm sure it's John Ronson. He's a British journalist, and he does documentaries and things like that. He's very kind of quirky. So listen to his description and listen to Alex Jones' description, and you'll get quite a different take on what they think is happening.
Because
And that
Alex
just that
Jones screams it like a crazy person. And then if you listen to the other guy, he says it in a same similar manner, but more calmly, like in a way
and
that
it,
a
well,
normal
it's
person can take in.
are these rich people again with networks of power who are performing very weird ceremonies, doing some crazy stuff. I from what I understand, yeah. But
It's just like a fraternity.
the next question, exactly. The next question is: are they the figurehead of some Illuminati that is controlling everything and everybody? And you know, by the way, the Earth is flat, and by the way, this, and by the way, that. You know, and that's my point. Is yes, something might be happening, but we have to then ask, well, what actually is happening? And you know, often I don't know the answer to that. I'm just not willing to jump to a conclusion and decide what I think it is. So that's why I'm always kind of I like to pour cold water on a lot of stuff, because I just think we need the evidence before we
I'm going
jump
to
to
send you that
conclusions.
Joe Rogan episode. So, because I've sent it to
I do
people that
listen to Joe Rogan. Yeah, I
I've sent
do.
it to people that have, and I'm trying to get that guy on the show, but I've sent it to people and they go, this like, that's like, they have the same reaction you did. Like, what's going on? And then they listen to it and they act the same way I acted, because you realize all this shit that's going on where you're like, that's the reason I don't have a TikTok, reason I don't have Clubhouse is because it funds a lot of that shit
Don't
over there.
forget, China is a totalitarian government, and they have their own agenda, don't they, to try
To
to
think that they would be anything like what we want them to be is so stupid. And that's kind of the
absolutely.
point, is like, you can't fund these things anymore. You know, you can't do these types of things if you aren't going to be involved in it and try and change, which you shouldn't. I think it's stupid to even think that they're going to change or they're going to act a different way, because they've been running off this system that's been functioning this way for so long. You got to cut the ties off. We got to find a way to be more sustainable as people over here and stop being so reliant on them over there. And that's my biggest point here, is to sit and say that something isn't true. Like you said, don't jump to a conclusion, but to rule out any possible things, whether it's the lab thing, whether it's this, that's now all being flipped around. And it's funny because all these people that have been spouting the lab thing for so long and they were being called racist about it. And then now it comes in the news and they go to the same people that called them
Yeah,
racist. Hold on. They go to the same people that call them racist and go, look, they're going to the lab. It's now a
yeah.
possibility. You know what those people give it as an answer? Yeah, I mean, it probably did come from there. You glad you labeled me as something? That's my issue, is that people say shit and make people. It's like you're living in an era of schizophrenia where people start losing their fucking minds and everyone doesn't know who to believe or what to say. But to rule out anything and say anything is definitely not this or definitely this is so dishonorable.
I think we can say some things are so unlikely they're not worth giving much time to.
I
I
want to
think
fight a
that's
bear
fair
right
enough.
now. I'm so fucking ramped up. You got me
What's been
pepped
going
up,
on today? Have you been? Have you had a bad day at work or
snorting coke under the White House table.
what? But yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah. I forgot my thought now. My train of thought's gone.
Welcome to Out of the
Sorry.
Blank
Yeah. So
podcast.
yeah.
Take your shoes off at the door.
Yeah. It's a complicated world we live in, and yeah, I think a lot of very strange things do happen and are happening, but are they some, grand mass conspiracy? I personally don't think they are. I think the point I was actually going to make was about evidence and reserving judgment. What happens, I think, currently is because we have a need to kind of respond straight away
It's the long
on
game.
social media and stuff. We kind of essentially what we do, or what I try not to do it myself, but what it's easy to do is think, right, this is this issue. Okay, which box do I need to or which position do I need to take for this issue currently, which my tribe will agree with. So that's why I think you're seeing this. If what you're describing is, actually happening, which is it wasn't, it wasn't in a lab and then it is in a lab and people are flip flopping. Part of that could be because, 6 months ago to say that put you in this camp. I don't want to be in that camp. I want to be in this camp. Right. And now, if you say that, it puts you in the other camp. So you have to switch your view. So people are not actually investigating the merits of what is being said. They are simply looking at the rest of their tribe saying, what should I say about this? What's the rest of my tribe think about this? But again, that's a very psychological thing. That's human beings. We've always done that. Absolutely, in groups and out groups,
I'm not on a side. The only side I'm fighting here is the truth. I don't give a shit if it came from the lab. I don't give a shit if it didn't come from them. I want to know the truth. I'm tired of.
We should know.
It's like people for generations upon generations have been this ball, and this cat is just bopping them from left to right to left to right. And I'm like, I'm tired of that shit. Can we just get the honest answer? I would like people to be more honest about their shit. I've talked about that forever. It's why I don't have fake people on the show. I don't have someone that's not using their real name. I don't have people that they could say, well, I have to disguise and give myself an alias because I like to talk about aliens. I don't want people to affect my job. And I'm like, then don't come on my show. I need real thoughts and real emotion here. I don't want you screaming off some shit that you don't actually believe in just to get views. I don't give a shit about views. I'm happy if someone listens, sure. But I care about having an actual conversation and enhancing my own intelligence when it comes to understanding perspectives of so many other people. I think that's important. And when it becomes this side thing, people wearing masks or anti-mask or vax or anti-vax, it's like, I just want to know the truth. I want people to be able to function. It seems like there's only two types of people in the world: people that want to be left the fuck alone and people that won't leave them the fuck alone. There's got to be a happy medium where we can find a way to be able to survive together without everyone at each other's throats. But everything that gets tossed in, like I said, is a monkey wrench. It's people getting pinned up against each other.
It's symbolic. So
snake eating his own tail.
What happens is that people look for symbols to represent other things. So, and it's in the interests of certain thought leaders, politicians, whatever, to identify symbols that people then can latch onto. So a good example is a face covering. So a face covering is actually a fairly simple thing to wear. And most people in some situations, forget if we'd never had a pandemic now, let's say you were, I don't know, grinding some metal or something, and there's lots of metallic dust coming into the air. At that point, I don't care who you are, you're going to say, well, I better have a face mask on because I'm breathing in metal right now. So the concept of a face mask is in itself pretty neutral, but it becomes a symbol. It becomes a symbol for whose side you're on.
Are you saving lives or are you killing grandma?
And exactly, it becomes this. It's like wearing a T-shirt with your team's colors on it. It's a way to identify which team you're on, and when it becomes that, it becomes a problem.
Yeah, I was about to say, we don't do masks down here. Our governor, I think a few weeks ago, actually said that you don't have to do masks anymore because the CDC is like, yeah, you can't get it from surfaces, all this. Like, and there's actually an article that was trending on Twitter. It was like, are we still doing this theater where it was like people wiping down equipment and wiping down things with disinfectants? Like, how long is this theater going to be going on for? And I was like, the biggest proof I had about like the mask thing didn't make sense was when someone was talking about the COVID particles were smaller than like smoke. So I took my mask and I had my mask up and I didn't care if someone wanted me to wear it, I'll wear it. Some buildings down here, you do have to, like a medical facility, they want you to wear it. I'm like, I don't give a shit. It doesn't bother me that bad. I take my vape and I inhaled and I took my mask and put it up over my face and then I blew the smoke and it went right through my mask. And I was like, if the COVID particles are smaller than the smoke, I don't understand what this is.
But if you talk to somebody, I don't know whether you've got any favorite uncle or auntie that likes to get a bit close to you when she talks to you and you kind of feel the spittle on your face. Have you got anybody like that? That's a relative.
An uncle that likes to wrestle and you're like, why are we wrestling?
So you know, while it may be true that a mask isn't going to get rid of absolutely all the
It
the little
reduces most
droplets,
of the
it
particles.
reduces it.
Yeah.
Add to that saying let's keep a bit of a distance, it reduces it further. And I think we talked last time, it's all about risk analysis. So you're trying to reduce the risk to an acceptable level. So the only way to remove risk altogether would be to literally separate everybody completely, but you can't do that. So you have to reduce the risk to an acceptable level. And that's where you need to have your discussion. What is an acceptable level? And that's where different people will have different opinions, but at least we can have a sensible conversation about what that acceptable level is.
If you
And I
work
think
at a
that's fair enough.
retirement home or you're around people that are susceptible to this type of thing, you need to be wearing a mask, in my opinion. But if you here's where it goes too far is when my buddy was jogging down the street and a woman that was on the other side of the street came over to his side of the street because he was jogging without a mask and told him to put his fucking mask on. That's how she said it. Put your fucking mask on. And he goes, the amount of time you've stopped me to talk, I'm actually infecting you even more. So you might want to get away from me. And it's kind of like when you're driving and you're looking for a place you've never been and you turn your radio down to be able to find the directions because you think it helps you see better. People feel the need to speak louder, so they pull their mask down to be able to talk. And it's like, you're fucking with me. You're messing with me in some aspect of things. I get it. If you're around people that are susceptible to this thing, you wear a mask.
Also, if you're thinking about, if you again think about yourself as imagine you are a public health official and it's your responsibility to keep the numbers of infections down. At that point, you might say, well, we want everybody to wear masks when they're indoors, particularly because although you might be a quite healthy young person, you still could catch it and pass it on to somebody else. So we're trying to reduce the R number, it's called. This is the number of people that any individual will infect. So if you get it down to less than 1, then the amount of cases start to fall. As soon as that R number goes above 1, then it means that there's more people that you're going to infect than you, if you like. So
Yeah.
it means that the curve is going to go up. So that in this country, that's been the thing that we've been looking at. I have to say, we haven't worn masks outside anywhere in the country for absolutely. In fact, I don't think we've ever had to wear them outside.
Well, the particle thing, you're talking about it
Different.
cuts off half the particles. Fauci was like, I can fix that double mask. And you're like,
yeah. Again, this is one of those questions. At what point is it kind of possible to do it and not?
I'm going to
so this is about
right into someone's mouth.
This is about risk reduction, So yeah, I mean, it's difficult, but it'd be great if everybody could have a conversation like us right now, wouldn't it?
I don't think anybody has my brain or your brain, but I mean, it was fun. I had a great time. I feel like now you're really ready for those Swedish meatballs.
I definitely am. Yeah, I
worked up an appetite. Got me going. I'm ready for the take on the day.
Good. Well, it was great to talk to you. Thanks for inviting me on.
Well, Stephen, where can people find you and be able to look up your stuff before I bombard you with that Spotify episode? Actually, you tell them I'm going to send it to you right now.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm a big fan of podcasts of all sorts, so send me any recommendations you like. So I suppose the thing that that we're most interested in at the moment is our podcast, which is called "What Should I Think About?" question mark. What should I think about? It's on all of the podcast applications, and basically it's around the idea that because I left a high control group over 20 years ago, I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I left that over 20 odd years ago. I had to kind of work out what I thought about a whole bunch of stuff. So essentially, we look at all those things. So it could be gender, it could be aliens, it could be politics, and we also do interviews. So we interview a different person every week. This week, we interviewed Professor Chris French, who looks into the psychology of things like alien abduction and satanic panic and all those things. So it's a very interesting guy. So What Should I Think About is the podcast.
I'll make sure I link it in the description. And well,
Fantastic.
Thanks for joining me again and entertaining the ramblings
Anytime.
of mine.